In this video we're going to take a look at hand planes and how we set up the smoothing plane and its component parts. Now the base down at the bottom is usually called the sole, and it has a toe at the front end and a heel at the back. The opening on the sole is the mouth, and the mouth is where the blade protrudes from. You're going to see on the body as well, you've got two handles, one at the front and one at the back. It's intended to be used two-handed. You've got two settings that you can change on the smoothing plane. Now, the first is the adjustment lever that changes the angle of the blade, and the second is the adjustment wheel that changes how deep the blade is going to cut. We'll look at that more in a little more detail later on. Now we have the plane iron. Now this is the actual cutting blade that goes in the planer. It's going to sit on top of the assembly here. Above that is going to be the cap iron. Now that helps to keep plane iron secure. It also helps to clear any scrap wood that could get stuck in the way in the mouth. And the lever cap here sits on top and holds everything firmly in place. Now the plane iron is obviously one of the most important parts because it does the actual cutting. You should be regularly checking that the blade is sharp enough to be used and free of damage. They've mostly got the angle that they should be honed to stamped on the plane iron itself. If you're unsure though, obviously you can ask, or you can use the internet to find this information for your plane. The cap iron gets attached directly to the plane iron with this bolt that we can see here. So it slots through that hole and then slides up the slot. Now it should be positioned fairly close to the tip of the plane iron and then tightened in place. This is then mounted onto the body, and you'll see the little slots there that attaches to the lever, which is connected to the adjusting wheel. Now that lets the blade move backwards and forwards, and by extension lets it change the depth that it's going to be cutting to. And then lastly, the lever cap sits on top and then it gets locked down into place. There are only two adjustments that you can make to a smoothing plane, and that's adjusting the depth adjustment wheel here to change how deep it's going to cut, or by changing the adjustment lever at the top, which will change the angle of the blade, as you can see here. Setting these things up will have an impact on how well the plane's going to cut for the job you're trying to do. If the blade depth is too low down, if it's sitting too deep, it'll dig in too much and it will be very, very difficult to cut, or it might not cut at all. It's best to start out with the blade fully retracted into the frame. Now, you'll see there we've done a full pass side to side. We've not taken any material off there. By bringing the blade down gradually, we're going to just skim the surface, which is what we really want to be doing with a planer. We just want to be able to run it with the grain of the wood and just take off tiny shavings each time. Now the whole intention here is that we can level the piece of wood. The surface could be leveled out, or we can thin it down to a set depth if we need to. So really control is the key thing here. As you can see, we're just doing full passes side to side. Now, the second plane we're going to look at is very similar, but a bit smaller, the block plane. It has the sole very similar, the mouth and the blade protrudes a little bit. Again, different brands are set up in slightly different ways, but they all do the same job. The block plane's different because you can use it with one hand. So here what we're doing is moving the angle of it every time to round over the corner to give us a profiled edge. If we were keeping this at the same angle each time and doing repeated passes, we can get a fairly clean 45-degree angle on our corner. Although again, it's best to mark that on, and it may be specified as part of your work and drawing. Over at the end grain though, we want to make sure we're always going with the grain. That's why we're doing it at that angle there, coming down at it. Planing across the grain is just going to chip out the corners of the wood and leave a really poor finish.